All right, let's dive right into this Neanderthal genomics thing. You know I'm always up for a good scientific puzzle, and this Svante Pääbo winning a Nobel Prize and all that really got me thinking. Sequencing the Neanderthal genome, that's got to be huge, right?
It's absolutely massive. Imagine going from these crude cave drawings to suddenly having high-definition pictures of our ancient relatives. See, before Pääbo came along, we only had bones and tools to tell us about the past.
Right, which is cool and all, but...
Definitely.
Yeah.
But it's just a tiny peek into the bigger picture, you know? Pääbo figured out a way to tap into a whole other level of information, ancient DNA.
Wait, hold up. We're talking about getting actual DNA, like genetic material, from these hominins who lived, what, thousands of years ago? Isn't DNA super fragile? I vaguely remember from biology class.
Oh, it's incredibly fragile. Imagine a single strand of spaghetti, right? But it's been snapped into a million pieces, left out in the sun, rained on for centuries.
Okay, I get it. Not a pretty picture.
And that's just the beginning. It's also riddled with contamination, bacteria, even bits of modern human DNA mixed in. Talk about a mess.
So seriously, how did Pääbo even begin to work with that? It sounds impossible.
It was a huge GE challenge. Back in the 80s, he was really ahead of his time. He realized that even the tiniest bit of contamination, someone sneezing in the lab, could totally skew the results. So he became the king of clean.
You mean super organized?
Well, obsessed. He developed these crazy strict procedures, special clean rooms, all to protect those precious ancient DNA samples.
Wow, that's dedication. No wonder he snagged a Nobel Prize. So he basically created the gold standard for how you handle this stuff, right?
Exactly. And his early work with mummies, like Egyptian mummies, was key. It was like boot camp for learning to extract and analyze ancient DNA. He learned just how sneaky contamination can be.
It does sound kind of Indiana Jones-ish now that you mention it. Trading in the whip for lab equipment, though, I guess. But okay, so he figures out how to handle this super delicate contaminated DNA. How do you go from a tiny fragment to a whole genome sequence? That's a big jump.
And that's where his timing was perfect. Remember when those high-throughput sequencing technologies burst onto the scene? Pääbo was one of the first to realize, hey, we can use this for ancient DNA. It was like having this huge jigsaw puzzle, but the pieces are microscopic, right?
And most of them are missing, probably.
Exactly. But these new technologies let him analyze millions, even billions of these tiny fragments all at once.
So he found a way to put those shattered pieces back together. That's incredible.
It was a huge deal. In 2010, his team published the first draft of the Neanderthal genome. It wasn't just another research paper, it was a bombshell. And honestly, it was just the beginning of this amazing story hidden within our genes.
Okay, now you've got me hooked. What did we actually learn from that first Neanderthal genome? Did it just confirm what we already knew from fossils?
Not even close. One of the big questions about Neanderthals was, how are they related to us, to modern humans? Did they just vanish? Or was there some, mixing going on?
The classic out of Africa theory. Our ancestors started there and then spread out, replacing other hominins like Neanderthals along the way.
Right. But Pääbo's work threw a fascinating curveball into that story.
Ooh, I love a good plot twist. Don't leave me hanging. What did he find?
Well, when he compared the Neanderthal genome to modern human genomes from all over the world, something really interesting popped up. People with roots outside of Africa, that includes you and me, actually carry a little bit of Neanderthal DNA.
Wait, are you saying I have Neanderthal ancestors? Now, that's something they never taught in school. How can we be sure it's from interbreeding, though? We're talking about something that happened a really long time ago.
Good point. But it's the pattern of Neanderthal DNA in modern humans that's so telling. It's not random at all. The most likely explanation. When our ancestors migrated out of Africa, they met up with Neanderthals. And, well, let's just say they weren't opposed to a little interspecies mingling.
Wow. Okay, this is blowing my mind. So I'm part Neanderthal. Check. But what does that actually mean for me? Am I more likely to be good at hunting mammoths or something?
Haha, it's not quite that straightforward. It's way more complicated than that. But finding out that we have this Neanderthal DNA opened up a whole new area of research. We're not just studying Neanderthals in isolation anymore. We're trying to figure out what those ancient genes are doing in us right now. Could be good, could be bad.
Okay, now that's what I'm talking about. That's the really interesting part. But wait, before we jump into the whole Neanderthal genes and their effects today thing, let's talk about those Denisovans you mentioned. Didn't you say that's when things get really wild?
Oh, yeah. The Denisovans, they really add another whole layer to our family history. Back in 2008, archaeologists found this finger bone, just a finger bone, in the Denisova cave in Siberia. It was ancient. And when Pääbo got a hold of it, well, let's just say his whole being super careful with DNA thing really paid off again.
Okay, now I got to know what happened. What'd they find in the DNA?
It didn't match anything. Not Neanderthal, not modern human, nothing. Pääbo has stumbled onto a completely new hominin species, like a distant cousin we never even knew we had.
No way. A whole new branch on our family tree and all from a single finger bone. That's unbelievable. So we're not just a little Neanderthal. We have Denisovan in us, too. Who were these Denisovans?
That's the thing. We still don't know a whole lot about them compared to Neanderthals. I mean, all we have are a few bone fragments, teeth from that Siberian cave, and a jawbone found in Tibet. But even with those tiny clues, their DNA is telling us a lot. For instance, remember we were talking about those Tibetans who live at super high altitudes?
Right. They can handle that thin air like it's nothing. You said it was a perfect example of how those ancient genes could be a good thing.
Exactly. And guess what? Turns out the gene that helps them do that allows their blood cells to use oxygen more efficiently up there. It came from Denisovans.
Whoa, seriously. That amazing adaptation, being able to live on top of the world. We got that from Denisovans. It really shows you how crucial this whole interbreeding thing was. But you said earlier, it's not always good inheriting these ancient genes. So what are the downsides?
Yeah, it's definitely a mixed bag. I mean, think about it. A gene that might have helped your ancestors fight off some infection thousands of years ago, it could cause problems for you today. Like, maybe it's linked to an autoimmune disease now.
Right, because our bodies are basically walking museums. We're carrying around these genes that made sense back then, but maybe not so much in our modern world.
It's true. And some of those Neanderthal genes, they've been linked to some not-so-fun things. Higher risk of depression, blood clotting issues, even get this nicotine addiction.
Nicotine addiction?
Yeah.
You're kidding. How is that even possible?
I know, it's wild, right? And get this, there's even research that shows some Neanderthal genes might make people more likely to get really sick from COVID-19.
Oh, wow, that's a bit scary, isn't it? So those ancient genes could affect how my body reacts to a virus today. It really makes you realize how connected we are to our past.
Totally. It's like we have this little piece of prehistory right inside us. But, you know, it's not all about the genes. Don't forget, the environment matters too. Our lifestyle, our choices, those play a big role in our health and who we are.
Absolutely. It's nature and nurture working together. But I have to say, learning all this about Neanderthals, Denisovans, mixing it all up, it really changes how I see humans. You know, we're not this finished product. We're like this blend of all these different lineages.
I like that, a blend. It really highlights the big question in all of this. What makes us us? What makes humans human? We know Neanderthals and Denisovans, they were pretty similar to us, big brains, used tools, even made art. But something happened to us, to our branch of the family, that allowed us to do more. To develop language, build civilizations, take over the world, basically.
So what was the difference? Is there some kind of humanity gene they're looking for?
If only it were that easy, it's probably a bunch of genetic changes, not just one thing. And that's where Pääbo's work is really important. By comparing our genome to theirs, scientists can start to pinpoint those tiny changes that are unique to Homo sapiens, the ones that might hold the key to our amazing brains.
It's fascinating. It's like we have this blueprint now,
Yeah.
and we can highlight all the little things that set us apart. So are scientists getting close to figuring out what those crucial differences are?
It's like, well, imagine trying to find a few specific grains of sand on an entire beach. That's kind of what it's like.
Okay, yeah, I see what you mean. So how do they even begin to narrow it down? Are there any promising leads in this genetic scavenger hunt?
They're definitely making progress. They've found a bunch of genes that we have, you know, modern humans that Neanderthals and Denisovans didn't. And some of these genes, they're involved in some pretty important stuff like brain development, language, even our immune system.
But how do they figure out what these genes actually do? We can't exactly ask a Neanderthal to, like, solve a math problem or something.
That's where things get really cool. Scientists are using this new technology, CRISPR, to basically Neanderthalize human cells. They take those ancient gene variants and insert them into modern human cells, and then they watch what happens.
So they're like rewinding evolution in a petri dish.
Pretty much. It's giving us this incredible glimpse into how those little genetic tweaks might have played out. But yeah, you're right. It's a huge task. There are so many genes to look at.
And I bet every answer just leads to more questions, right?
Absolutely. But that's what makes it so exciting. Every discovery opens up new avenues to explore, and the implications of all of this, they go way beyond just understanding where we came from.
Oh, how so? What else can we learn from these ancient genes?
Well, for one thing, it could revolutionize how we treat diseases. If we understand how those Neanderthal or Denisovan genes are affecting us today,
Hmm.
we might be able to design new drugs or therapies that are more effective, personalized medicine.
So it's not just about looking back, it's about using that knowledge to improve our lives right now.
Exactly. And maybe even more importantly, I think it really challenges how we see ourselves. For so long, humans have put themselves on this pedestal separate from the rest of nature. But Pääbo's work, and really all of paleogenomics, it shows us a different story, a much more complex, intertwined story. We're not this, end product, but rather this incredible mosaic of lineages shaped by, well, who knows how many interactions and adaptations over millions of years.
It's kind of humbling when you think about it that way. We're carrying around a bit of all of them, our ancient relatives, in our DNA.
Exactly. And who knows what other secrets are still waiting to be unlocked in there.
It's pretty mind-blowing. Well, that was an incredible journey. To everyone listening, I cannot recommend enough diving into some of the resources we've provided. Explore the world of paleogenomics. It's fascinating stuff. And just think, if you could go back in time and meet a Neanderthal face to face, what would you ask them? What other mysteries do you think are hidden in our DNA, just waiting to be discovered? That's all the time we have for this deep dive. Until next time, keep exploring.